So I wanted to open the show, and the reason I brought FP Santangelo Jr. on is because FP's been around baseball his whole life. He's played baseball his whole life. I played baseball my whole life, and I thought if I can bring somebody on that I know, has done the radio. He also does KCSB sports staff with me, and we are on the weekly show usually every Wednesday. So I brought him in to bring his expertise, and we're going to talk about the proposed rule changes that Major League Baseball has thought about implementing. They haven't actually made any, actual formal legislation for this, but the proposed rule changes are raising the strike zone to make it higher, putting a runner on second base once the start of extra innings begins, if that does happen, and lastly, the intentional walk changing from pitches being thrown for balls to just sending the guy to first base. So we'll go through them in order, raising the strike zone, putting a runner on second, and then the intentional walk, and give our thoughts on whether or not we think this is smart for the game, whether or not we think this helps the game. And I think what we really want to let the listeners know out there is the reason that these rules are being thought about is because the pace of play and the length of time it's taking for baseball games is now longer than it was even 20 years ago. And even with technology improving and us talking about this for the last 10 years, the pace of play has gone down. And we'll talk about a great article from Tom Verducci. But FP, what are your thoughts on the first proposed rule change in the raising the strike zone?
Well, before we get into that, if you look at MLB in the past, I want to say 10 years, there's been a lot of different rule changes, and this is kind of shocking to me because this is a game that guys do not really like when stuff has changed.
Right.
I mean, in 2014, we have expanded replay. This is huge, controversial. You can actually challenge a call now on the field, and there's a booth in New York, as we know, that umpires will go and review this. And then also in 2014, they had the Buster Posey rule put in, which is the collision rule, and for those of you who do not know, Buster Posey was crushed at home plate by Scott Cousins, and it resulted in Posey losing his leg for the rest of the season. Really unfortunate thing there. And in 2016, last year, we had 2 rule changes already. One of them was a mound visit rule. And I don't know if you know this, Alec, but this is one of those things that was kind of enforced, but not really. You had 30 seconds to have a mound visit. And there's actually a little thing between each inning where you had to wait 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Like, they were trying to get it going really fast.
Right.
And then the chase out the rule, of course, which we all know. You can't slide hard in a second anymore. Really controversial stuff. But getting back to your point, all this stuff is changing really, really fast. Do you like this or?
Well, I'll tell you this. I think what it is and what it is a product of is that we are in an age now that is ruled by the smartphone, that is ruled by instant streaming, it is ruled by YouTube, Facebook, and everything is instant access. And I think what we have seen, especially us, the millennials, if you'll call us that, I mean, we were born in the mid-'90s, but we are a part of that millennial age. And I think the problem is we can no longer have the attention span that we used to. And it's really hard for a lot of people to look at baseball as America's pastime, as America's sport, as it used to be. And no one ever thought baseball would be dethroned. And no one ever thought that. The NFL obviously has, and Major League Baseball is really kind of in a tough spot right now. And I think what it is they're trying to figure out a way to grab people's attention and say, okay, we understand you want to be on Twitter all day and Instagram and check your feed, but don't forget that this game of baseball is really great, and how can we tap into that? And I think they've done a great job by highlighting their younger players and the athletes that we see in Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, and the rule changes that they have implemented have worked. I do like the instant replay. The other rules are more for safety issues, but I think what we're seeing is that the MLB is trying to adjust to an age that simply thinks that baseball is too boring, and that's how I feel about it.
No, I completely and absolutely agree. You have high-contact sports like the NFL. Guys are getting crushed. Something's happening every second. You even have high-contact sports like hockey, which a lot of fans are turning to now. And you have all this stuff going on in the NBA where there's constant action, constant action. So when you put a millennial into a baseball game setting, they have to wait for a pitch. They got to wait for contact. I mean, there's games celebrated in baseball where no hits happen.
Right.
So this is a growing issue for Major League Baseball, and they're trying to figure out any single way they can to kind of nip this issue in the bud before it becomes a larger issue. And that's when we're starting to talk about the strike zone thing again.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about raising the strike zone 2 inches. What is that going to do to baseball? It's going to put more balls in contact, and that's exactly what they want to happen.
Right.
But at the same time, they do not really realize all the other things that might occur because of this. For example, guys might end up striking out more because you look at a ball. We've both played. We both know this. You get a ball up,
It looks
easy
good.
to hit.
Yeah, it looks good.
You're going to start swinging at that pitch more, but you swing through it. It's really, really hard to hit a ball like that.
Yeah, it's hard to catch up to a pitch that is rising like that.
It is. And besides that, I mean, it's just really difficult to enforce a rule like that, too. These umpires have been doing the exact same strike zone from the armpit down to the top of the kneecap for so long now. And you're going to tell them, okay, you got to go 2 inches a little bit higher.
Yeah.
How hard is that going to be to enforce? I think that's going to take a couple of years to truly take effect if you want this to happen.
Right, and I think with the umpires and something that we know as fans and as players that actually have been involved with the game since we were little, even in T-ball, is sometimes when I watch a game, I'll let a person know that frankly doesn't maybe watch baseball that much. Well, why did he call that a strike, and why the last time we watched this, you explained to me that the strike zone was this big? The main issue that I've seen is that the strike zone tracker that we see in games,
brutal.
I hate it because you have to understand that every umpire has his strike zone, and certain players will have to adjust to that. So at the beginning of a game, an umpire usually is supposed to set his boundaries and say, here's what I'm going to call today, and this is what I'm not going to call today, and I'm going to let you know at the start of the game, and that's the unwritten rule. Here's how it's supposed to go. And then the leadoff hitter is always supposed to take the pitches and go back in the dugout and say, all right, he's calling it low today. Let's remind ourselves that. And now the pitcher knows, okay, he's going to call that low changeup I'm going to throw. Okay, let's do it.
It's one of those things that it's the game inside of the game that makes the game itself so beautiful. You have to make adjustments to the strike zone. Whether you're a player, whether you're a pitcher, whether you're a coach, you have to understand going into this game, hey, he kind of has a high strike zone. Oh, he's kind of a lower strike zone. He really likes that outside spot on the paint. And you got to make an adjustment as a hitter. You got to get on the plate. You got to get away from the plate. And as a pitcher, you just got to make pitches happen.
Yeah.
So if you start taking this away and you start saying, okay, we got to make adjustments by 2 inches, you know how hard that's going to be to just enforce. I just really don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think here's the if you want to look at it just from a physical standpoint, I think it's helpful to taller players. And I think it's more of a disadvantage to those who are shorter. Now, I saw a video earlier. Chris Bryant was interviewed by Sports Illustrated during their stream service, and he said, you know what, I'm actually excited about it if they do change it because I like the pitch high up, and he's a taller guy who's stronger who can reach that pitch that's higher. Now, whether or not the umps will proportionally change the strike zone based on the height of the player is another question. But if they raise the overall strike zone, I think taller players are going to look at this and say, you know what, I'm looking at my chops a little bit because I'm ready for that pitch. I like that high pitch. Now, there are guys out there that don't like the high pitch. There are guys that like pitches outside. There are guys that like pitches inside. So everyone's different. I think if you move the strike zone up, I think it's going to do exactly what you stated at the beginning. It's putting the ball in play, and that's what Major League Baseball wants. They don't really care so much about the run production as they care about action and actually having players move and have there be movement in the game, because there's a chart, and we'll talk about it with Tom Verducci, that it's not necessarily the pace of the play, the time that it takes, even though games are now 10 minutes longer on average than they were 10 years ago. They're at 3 hours, averaging 3 hours per game, not playoff games, regular season games, and they used to be 2 hours and about 15 minutes. But now what we're seeing is that the pace of the play and the actual action pace is slowed down. So if they do move the strike zone up, I think, like you said, it's more about putting the ball in play, less about the runs.
Exactly.